You probably started your business because you wanted freedom. You had that entrepreneurial seizure and decided, that's it, I'm going to start my own business. You wanted freedom with your time, freedom to make your own choices and decisions. You wanted freedom to build something magnificent. And yet, for a lot of entrepreneurs, the irony in here is that somewhere along the way, we accidentally built a very demanding job that gives us less freedom than we had before. We're working nights, we are burning the midnight oil, we're working weekends, and we're always feeling like there's more to do. It is never done. And somehow, even after working all week, it also still feels like nothing is actually finished. Now, if that sounds familiar, in this week's episode of Weekly Momentum, we are going to fix that. Because the real issue usually isn't discipline or motivation or even time management. The real issue is that most entrepreneurs never experience that feeling of completion. There's no finish line for the week. And when your week doesn't have a finish line, it just keeps on going and work expands into every single corner of your life. So today, I want to show you a simple shift that you can make that's going to create that finish line and give you back time, freedom, and momentum. So join me in this week's episode of Weekly Momentum. Hello, I'm the Get It Done Diva, and this podcast is all about helping entrepreneurs create momentum in their business without burning themselves out in the process. So make sure that you subscribe if you're new so you don't miss any of the future episodes. One of the biggest differences between having a job and running a business is that jobs have these built-in completion points. You submit the report, you finish the project, you turn something in, but even more importantly, even if you haven't done those things, a lot of times at 5 o'clock you clock out. On Friday evening, you're done. On Monday morning, you start again. Not every job, but that's common in a lot of the day-to-day working environments that we are used to for people that have a job. Entrepreneurship is rarely that simple. Your marketing isn't finished on Friday at 5. Improving your systems is never finished. I hate to break it to you. Growing your business isn't finished. Even when you work all day long from 5 a.m. to 9 p.m., which is the common role for a lot of entrepreneurs, there still is more that you could do. And that word could is where we create this trap for ourselves. Because if there's always something that you could do, you start feeling like you should be working all the time. And your brain, it never gets the signal that something is complete, something is done. And without that signal, you stop feeling something really important. As human beings, we need to feel a sense of accomplishment. Without accomplishment, work becomes exhausting. And it's not because you're lazy, even though so often we tell ourselves that. You know, the voice in our head, the itty bitty shitty committee, has a habit of telling us that we're lazy and unmotivated, but it's not true. It's because humans need to feel a sense of progress. And when you can't see progress, it starts to feel like you're just like Sisyphus pushing a boulder up a hill. And there's this burnout loop that entrepreneurs tend to fall into. It's a cycle that I see all the time, and I hate to say that I have been in that cycle a lot of times myself. The first phase is that you are working all the time, and you don't think that you're always going to be working all the time. You are telling yourself that you're just working all the time until you get ahead, right? Because you feel that B word. You know the B word I'm talking about? You feel behind. And so you're going to work all the time trying to get ahead. You're going to work evenings till late. You're going to work on weekends. You're going to be checking email constantly because you're trying to get caught up. But what happens is, after being in this phase for a prolonged period of time, you eventually hit phase two. And phase two is where you burn out. And it's the opposite of phase one. You avoid work, you feel behind, and you feel guilty, and you cannot do anything. So you are completely burnt out. You're doing nothing, but all of that guilt and all of that feeling like you should be doing something is still there. So then, after a little while of burnout, you manage to rally yourself up, and then you push harder again. And the cycle repeats again and again and again. And if we don't shift this cycle, what happens is we completely burn out. Our body breaks down and we're unable to do anything anymore. Many entrepreneurs live in this burnout cycle, this loop, for years. And it's amazing how resilient our bodies and our souls and our minds can be to put ourselves through this. And it's not because we lack discipline. It's because our weeks don't have the structure that we need to create that sense of completion, of accomplishment. And that's exactly where weekly momentum comes in. So weekly momentum is a 4-step process. If you've been following this podcast for a while, hopefully you've made weekly momentum podcast a habit so that you can show up every week and you can make your way through the 4 steps. You might not do them perfectly. That's okay. I just want you to touch on all 4 of the steps so that you can create this pause before you move into the next week. You create a boundary around your week. So just the act of doing weekly momentum is going to help you begin to break the cycle. What we want to do is we want to first, in step 1, we want to rewind. So we want to just look back over the last week, look at what worked, what didn't, and why, and begin to go through. I have 7 questions in my planner that will help you create an evolution every week so that you're actually learning and growing from the last week, not just forging forward right into the next week. So step 1 is all about that. And all of these steps, if you want to learn more about them, you can grab the link in the description below and go to the weekly planning pages for busy professionals. There's videos and worksheets you can download. It's a free training, and it'll take you all the way through these steps. I'm just touching on them right now. So the first step is rewind. The second step is where you realign. You remind yourself what's important. You look back at your bigger goals. And this doesn't have to take very long. I'm just basically in this step reminding you, hey, what's your annual goal? Hey, what's your 90-day goal? And look at the bigger goals so that you can get yourself back on track and see where you may have gone awry. So step 2 is just realigning. It's almost like plugging back in the coordinates for where you're going because you got off the freeway to go get a Starbucks and you got yourself turned around a little bit. You don't know where you are. You got to realign. You've got to plug back in the coordinates and tell the mapping software exactly where you want to go. So step 2, just look at your bigger goals. Just remind yourself where you're heading. And then step 3 is where you plan. And I want to dive into this right now. So what we do in weekly momentum, and trust me, this is going to tie in with what I was talking about at the beginning in just a moment. So when you do your planning stage for the week, you create a weekly top 10 list. Now, one of the biggest distinctions of that from what entrepreneurs usually do is it's not a never-ending list that has so many items on it that everything is equally important. It's hard to really see what's important and which ones to do. So by just creating a weekly top 10, you're already putting those 10 things above everything else that you have to do. I understand you have more than 10 things to do in a week, right? And when you create the weekly top 10 list, the other thing you're doing is you're making it that these are things that you want to do, it's your weekly top 10, it changes it from just being a wish list. You want it to be a project list, a list you can use that you can look at every single day when you plan your day to guide you through your week. Your weekly top 10 becomes your roadmap for the week. And these 10 items are going to be items that are going to move your business forward. I don't want you to just put on your weekly top 10 all kinds of random things that are just things that you need to do or things that you're going to do anyway. You want to make these 10 items the things that are going to really move you forward in your business so that you are building a foundation instead of treading water. What I see a lot of times when I'm helping my clients create the weekly top 10 list or I'm doing this exercise in a workshop is that I often find that the items that are being written down are things that, need to do this for a client or keep doing this one thing. And that's not going to build a better future for you. You probably do need to do those items, and you will do those items, but you're less likely to do those working on your business, those items that are going to actually build a better future, create systems so that you can stop treading water and start to actually notice yourself making progress and feel a sense of accomplishment. So you want to raise the bar, you want to upgrade the quality of the items that you're writing on your weekly top 10 list. And the two things that I've just said is that you want to make it not a wish list and it's not a never-ending list that you just keep adding to. So it's not 50 items. It's not every single thing in your head. It's just the top 10. And the way that you're going to get to that is on the weekly planning pages or on just a piece of paper. You're going to dump everything that's in your head first before you make the list. A lot of people skip that step, and then what they do is the list is whatever's in their head at the time. So I'm encouraging you to do a brainstorming session. I like to think of it as a brain dump. And you put everything on the page first for the week that you're thinking of doing or that people want you to do or that you need to deliver or promises that you've made. And then you pick from that the top 10, just 10. Now, this is already going to create a little bit more boundaries around the scope of work that you're going to be doing for the week. Yes, you'll still do client work. Yes, you'll do things beyond the top 10, but this top 10 will act like your guiding star to guide you through the week. And one thing that you can do is you can set aside 25 minutes of Pomodoro each day to work on your top 10. And then the rest of the day, do all the other stuff that you feel like you have to do. If you just created a habit and the boundaries around that of 25 minutes a day, ideally 52 Pomodoros, but start under promising and then you can over deliver. So start with 25 minutes a day of just focusing on something from your weekly top 10 list. And if by the end of the week you haven't completed very many items on the list and you've applied this strategy that I just shared about the one Pomodoro a day, then that tells me that you're over-promising on the list and you need to write down less on the list. So at the end of the week, what's going to help you really see this too is when you score your week. So on the weekly planning pages, you'll see there is a scoring system. And I know some of you might be like, I don't want to score it. I just want to make my list. That feels overwhelming. But there's two really powerful things that happen when we score our weekly top 10 at the end of the week. Number one, we're gamifying things. And so a lot of the time that's going to feel kind of fun. And it's going to measure something that maybe is hard to measure otherwise. Because if I ask someone, how did last week go? How much did you get done? Oftentimes they are going to say, I feel like I didn't achieve anything. And then when I press them a little bit and I ask some questions, we uncover that they really did get a lot done. So we can't rely on our memory to remind us or to clearly state how much we got done. And the scoring system is going to allow you to see in black and white whether you completed something, you score 1. Whether you started but you didn't finish, that's a half point. Whether you didn't start it at all, that's a 0. And whether you maybe just went above and beyond on the item, knocked it out of the ballpark, and then you get to score a 2. So that's the scoring system, and it's going to help you recalibrate how you're planning and start to see what you're doing to overpromise and where you can maybe underpromise a little bit more. And you're going to, over the week, start to build a better weekly top 10. And then you're going to score your week. You add up all the scores. And when you do that, you're going to get a very clear picture of what's working, what's not, and why. And when you start to see, I scored a 1 or even a half point, it may sound silly, but you're going to feel a sense of accomplishment, a feeling that you're making progress. And that's going to give you more of a excitement and more momentum to actually want to do more. When we feel like we're always behind, gradually it just sucks all the air out of us, all of the energy, all of the momentum. But something as simple as scoring your week can allow you to begin to shift your relationship with time a bit, plan better and stop overpromising, and feel a sense of progress. And all 3 of these things are going to allow you to see visible progress. And that is going to give your brain the experience of accomplishment again. And so you're going to stop feeling like you're burnt out and you're working all the time and getting nowhere. And it's going to fuel your momentum. Now, the final step of the weekly momentum process, step 4, just so you know, is to plug in. And that's where you've planned your week, you've set up your weekly top 10. You actually need to plug it into your week, say when you're going to do what, make sure it fits. Just like when you're trying on clothes, you don't just buy the clothes, put them in the closet. You want to make sure that they actually fit. Otherwise, they're taking up closet space and it's not going to do you any good. So you want to make sure that the items on the list fit in your week. And one of the easiest ways to do this quite quickly is to, next to each line item, write down how many Pomodoros would that take? And then to just make sure you have enough room for those Pomodoros on your weekly calendar. Now, I understand I don't like to plan every single moment. To go back to what we were talking about at the beginning, freedom, right? We want to feel a sense of freedom. That's why we are entrepreneurs. That's why we started our own businesses. However, if we at least make sure that we have, I don't know, 10, 20, 30 Pomodoros worth of stuff on our top 10 list, we want to do the math, 30 times 25. Make sure we have that amount of time in our week, right? So that is step 1. It's a light, easy way to still feel like you have freedom around what and when you're doing it, but to create some momentum and a sense of progress. So if this idea of weekly momentum is resonating with you and you haven't subscribed to my podcast yet, make sure you subscribe, because here's the challenge. Again and again and again, I talk to people who've listened to the podcast or been a part of one of my workshops. When I talk to people who have applied this weekly momentum process, the method, to their week, on the weeks that they do that, they notice significant progress, exponential results compared to the weeks that they don't do it. And then I'll ask them, why didn't you do it? I forgot. So if you subscribe to the podcast, then every week you're going to have this little reminder. I'll bring in a different topic. I'll make it interesting. But I am going to touch on all 4 steps every single week. Now, there's another thing that I want to talk about as we are looking at this idea of freedom and being able to create that for yourself without feeling like you're tied down with exactly like being told what to do as if you had a job. So the other reason that entrepreneurs work all the time is because they've never actually designed their week. We just talked about designing your activities, your projects, your weekly top 10, but you also need to intentionally design your schedule, because what will happen is your work will expand into every open space. It's called Parkinson's law. And what it is that an activity is going to take as long as you set aside to do it. So, um, a little thing like checking your emails, when it's not given a dedicated admin time block with one Pomodoro set for it, it's just going to creep into your evenings and your weekends. Your projects without clear boundaries around them are just going to take over your entire week. And suddenly, work is going to fill up every available moment you have. So, one of the simplest tools that I have been sharing since day one, 20 years ago, when I started business coaching, is that I teach entrepreneurs to create what I call an ideal schedule. There's a couple of different versions of it, but ultimately, we want to create a set schedule for ourselves. It's not something that's attainable every single week, but we have to know what we want if we're going to beat Parkinson's law. If we're going to fit in what we want to each week, we have to know what that is and what it could look like. So that ideal schedule is a picture, a visual template of how your week should operate when things are working well. And one of the easiest ways I find to create an ideal schedule is to ask yourself a few simple questions and then begin to start using the color coding that I've talked about in other episodes, but I'll remind you of right now, to block out some of the main areas of work that you want to be including in every single week. That way you can quickly see visually whether or not you're doing that. Now, I want to just mention that we're talking about an ideal schedule, and sometimes people feel like, well, that's so far away. How am I going to get to that? So, what you might think of if you feel like your ideal schedule, what you really want it to be, is so far away, is you might come up with what I like to call a stepping stone schedule. So that's a bridge between where you are right now and that ultimate ideal schedule. So whether right now you want to work on an ideal schedule or a stepping stone schedule, honestly, I think a stepping stone schedule might feel more realistic right now, where it's a little bit of a stretch, a little bit more order than you have right now, but it's not ultimately where you want to be, but it is moving you in the right direction. You want to focus on creating that for yourself, that stepping stone schedule. So let me run you through a simple way to create either stepping stone or an ideal schedule, whichever one you want to create right now. So the first thing is just a series of simple questions. You want to ask yourself questions and start with the basics. So something as simple as, what time do you want to get up in the morning? What time do you want to start work? What time do you ideally want to clock in? What time do you want to finish work? What time do you want to go to bed? How many hours do you want to work with clients if you work with clients every week? How many hours do you want to work total each week, which would include client work in your business, as well as on your business and admin stuff, all of the things that you need to do. So you want to get a handle on that. How long do you want to take for lunch? Put in all of these pieces. It's almost like you're creating a drawing and you're putting the basic outline on first. Once you've gotten clear on that, you can start to bring in the color coding. So there's this thing that I like to refer to as your zone of genius, and the color for that is purple. And it's when you're doing the work, it's the reason that you started your business to start with. It's the bit you love. It's the bit that only you can do. Your zone of genius work is where you're making an impact. You are creating new content. You are teaching and sharing, whether it's with videos or books or creating a system. You're inventing things. That's your purple zone of genius work. And you may not have, if you're super busy right now and overwhelmed, a ton of time that you can set aside to do this each week. If you can set aside just a little bit of time every week for this work that really lights you up, it will make all the other work feel lighter and easier and more fun, because you're giving yourself an opportunity to play, to fan the flames of your desire, to embrace the hunger, and to really enjoy your business and being an entrepreneur. So whatever that purple work is, figure out a good time for it when you're not completely burnt out, and put a couple of Pomodoros into your week. Maybe it's a Friday morning after you've done your admin and you're feeling like you can decompress and you can spend some time in your zone of genius. Maybe it's a Monday morning or maybe it's a Saturday afternoon. But I want you to set aside some time as an experiment, right? And then you can adjust the schedule to fit once you begin to see how it works and you begin experimenting with it. So the purple zone of genius work, just a reminder, it's the work that only you can do for your business. Let's move now into blue. The color blue represents vision and building your future. It's the CEO hat that you put on. And so this is working on your business. Purple is working on your business too. CEO time, blue time, is when you are planning, you're designing and building systems, which is critical because, side note here, one of the reasons you might be feeling completely burned out and like you have a job is because you don't have any systems and you are the system. So if you want to begin to systematize your business, you're going to want to do that in this blue CEO time. And you're looking ahead, you're looking at what needs to be automated, how you can create checklists and systems for things, and you're really dictating the future and building it of the business. The blue time, the CEO time, is the work that moves you from working in the business to working on the business. So I would suggest that you're setting aside some time every week that is going to be this blue CEO time. And the more systems you build, the more you're going to be able to release yourself from being the bottleneck in your business. Because when you systematize things, the choices are predefined for what activities need to be done in your business. So therefore, you don't need to be a part of it. It can run without you, and you can then spend more time working on your business and in your purple zone of genius time. So you want to make sure that you are dedicating some time to this CEO blue time. Otherwise, you're never going to get out of the cycle of being the bottleneck of your business. Next up, we have green. Green represents money-making activities. These are revenue-producing activities. So this is the work that you do with clients, if you work with clients. It's sales conversations, and it's delivering what you've promised that you've been paid for. It's doing the work. So working in your business, green money-making activities, this is going to be like, what hours do you want to see clients? When are you going to have meetings with the team where you're helping them with their activities or deliver things? You want to be setting aside specific hours for money-making activities. Now, this is the work that keeps the business financially healthy. Of course, we need to be doing this work, but we want to, and you'll come back to this word in a minute, you want to put some boundaries around it. The final color that we're going to touch on right now, there's two other colors, but I'm mainly going to touch on the ones for your business, and that is red. Red represents admin, and admin is the communication piece, the day-to-day running, the filing, the checking your email, returning phone calls, listening to voicemails. It's the operations of the business. The admin is represented by red because it often is like a red light flashing for our attention. And it can be a go-to activity because we want to feel that sense of accomplishment that I talked about at the beginning. And the quickest fix for that is to empty our inbox or clear off our desk or put the files away. When we do these activities, these admin activities, we feel a sense of accomplishment and we get a hit of dopamine. It feels really good. And so if you tend to get sucked into these activities and are not doing any of the working on your business activities or even avoiding client work, that's not unusual, but we want to put some boundaries around it. And you may very want to start with building systems around your admin first so that it is more efficient. It can be done by someone else, and you're able to then let go of that, and you can step more into the blue, the purple, and the green roles. So once again, red is admin, it's email, logistics, it's, sending that gift off to the client, all the things that really you could delegate first to someone else. Now, what happens when you color code your ideal week like this? You you begin to see it's the rainbow effect, I like to call it. You can instantly see where your time's going. And if it looks like a rainbow, and I don't mean equal parts of every color, but when you see a rainbow, there's that moment where you go, "Oh, it's a rainbow," and you have to tell everyone. There's something that just feels good when we see a rainbow. That's what I mean when I say rainbow effect. So when you look at your week and you have it color coded and it feels good, it feels like it lights you up, like, yes, I want that. I want to lean into it. Then you know you're on the right track. Now, for example, if you color coded your week and it's 90% red admin, that's probably not going to feel like a rainbow. It's not going to light you up to look at it. So that's why I like to bring in this idea of how you feel when you look at this either ideal or stepping stone schedule that you're creating. You want it to reflect where you want to dedicate your time for your business, and begin to at least be touching on all of the colors so that you're making sure that you're not neglecting any areas of your business. Now, when you start to do this, what's kind of fun is then you get to gamify how am I going to get what I need to get done in the time that I have, which is a way for you to then revolt against Parkinson's law and begin to actually use it to your advantage rather than it taking over and sucking the time out of your week. So if you know I have 25 minutes, I'm going to do a Pomodoro on admin rather than I'm going to do my email and I'm going to do phone calls. If you actually dedicate specific amounts of time to those, then they have boundaries around them and you're going to get more done. So two things are going to happen with this ideal or stepping stone schedule and color coding. You're going to start to accomplish things and be more efficient. You're going to have boundaries around your time, and you're not going to feel like you're working all the time, which is going to unhook you from feeling like you just have a job that's very demanding and never ending. It is ironic, I think, that we start our businesses because we want freedom, and then we end up creating this demanding schedule. However, the solution to feeling more freedom is the opposite of what you would think. It's structure and boundaries. They create more freedom. When you have structure and boundaries around a project, you can then go play. You can play within that sandbox, and it's much more fun. Can you imagine playing a game, any game without any rules? It's really hard, and at some point, it just wouldn't be fun anymore. So we want to have structure and boundaries around our time, and that is going to give you more freedom. Now, when you combine your weekly top 10 with your ideal schedule, something magical happens. Your week suddenly has priorities, boundaries, and a finish line. Instead of working endlessly, you have a blueprint, you have a template for what success would look like that week. You know when something has moved forward and if you're making progress. And there's that sense of accomplishment that you're going to start feeling that's going to restore your energy. Now, as a caveat, I want to mention a lot of people feel like perfectionism creeps in, and then they feel like if they didn't live exactly the ideal schedule every single week, that they're not playing the game right, they're not doing very well. Obviously, we want to move towards our ideal schedule, but there's two things to keep in mind. Every week is a little different, I get that. But if you have a template, you got a better chance of at least maximizing the time that you have. So it might not look exactly like your schedule that you have for the week, but that's okay. Give yourself permission. It doesn't have to be perfect. The other thing is that you can move the blocks around. So you create your ideal or your stepping stone schedule, but then you realize that this week has some blocks in it for things that you already need to do that are getting in the way of you actually implementing your ideal schedule. That doesn't mean that if you say you were going to have a client meeting on a Monday this week because you have it booked already, but maybe Mondays are usually you're working on your business day. That doesn't mean you just throw working on your business on Monday out the window and you just don't do it at all. You figure out, okay, well, if I'm going to see clients on Monday instead, then which day or where are the time blocks where I'm going to be working on my business this week? And you find another spot for it. So don't just override the schedule. You want to move the blocks around to at least get as many of the blocks in as possible, even if it looks a little bit different than your ideal or your stepping stone schedule. The last thing I want to mention is I want to remind you of the momentum code. Now, this is a really simple little statement that will help you to really stay in integrity and remind you how to stay in momentum. It's something I did a whole episode on. If you want to go back to episode 1 of the podcast, I talk all about the momentum code. But right now, I'm just going to remind you what it is and just briefly explain. So it is 3 statements. Know what you want, say what you want, and do what you say. Now, your weekly top 10 is you knowing what you want, making a choice. Saying what you want is writing it down and committing to it. Scoring at least a 1 on each item is doing what you say. Your ideal schedule is you investing the time to really think about what you actually want your time to look like. It's a way for you to protect that schedule so that you can know what you want, say what you want by designing the ideal schedule, putting pen to paper, and then you can do what you say by taking that template and beginning to use it every week as you're planning your week. You can protect that schedule so that you can do what you say. Now, when those 3 pieces, know what you want, say what you want, do what you say, when they line up, we start to build momentum. Most entrepreneurs don't burn out because they're lazy. I hope you see that now, or because they don't care enough about their business. Probably the opposite is true. They burn out because their work never feels finished. Everything I talked about today helps you create some boundaries around that work and to be more efficient with it. There's always more improvement that we can do. We always have another idea or another thing we can think of. So without this structure around your week, work's just going to keep expanding into every single open crevice that you have. And that's why I keep coming back to the ideal schedule with my clients. We use it when we first start working together, and then we revisit it as we move from 90-day cycle to 90-day cycle so that we can see if we're moving towards it or away from it, and we can remind ourselves what we want. I really care about helping entrepreneurs design their time so that they can create time freedom. Not a perfect schedule, right? But a week that actually reflects the business that you're building and that has time for you to unhook yourself from the day-to-day grind and spend time working on your business so that you're building systems. A week that actually reflects the business that you want to build and the life that you want to live alongside it. Because once you see and imagine what your week could look like, everything starts to change. You know what you want. Your priorities, they get clearer. Your boundaries, I promise, will get stronger. And suddenly, it's much easier to spend time working on the business instead of feeling stuck working in it all the time. Now, if you'd like some help with designing an ideal schedule, I'd love to sit down with you and design your ideal schedule with you. I actually offer a 50-minute working session, which is standalone. We literally map out your week, we color code it, we look at your time and where it's going. We start shaping a schedule that could actually support you and begin to shift and create an ideal schedule. It's very hands-on. I've dropped the link below so you can grab a time that works for you and you can book that session if that feels like that might be the next step for you in creating momentum in your business. And until next time, remember, momentum isn't created once a year. It's created when you have a week that is built to handle your big, bold goals. I'll see you in momentum.